So hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to the fourth day of 2 weeks of Thomas Hardy. Today we're going to be talking about Under the Greenwood Tree. Chapter 1. Mellstock Lane. To dwellers in a wood, almost every species of tree has its voice as well as its feature. As the passing of the breeze, the fir trees sob and moan no less distinctly than the rock. The hollies whistle as it battles with itself, the ash hisses amid its quivering, the beeches rustle while its flat boughs rise and fall. And winter, which modifies the note of such trees as shed their leaves, does not destroy its individuality. So Under the Greenwood Tree was written by Thomas Hardy and was published in 1872, and it is my 11th favourite Thomas Hardy novel. Now, Under the Greenwood Tree is a weird one because in general it's not that there's anything I actively dislike about the book, more than that I just don't like it as much as other Hardy novels. It's a weird one also in that it's one of those Hardy books where you read it and you're like, oh, that's much less miserable than other Hardy novels. And then you stop and think about it a bit more and you're like, oh. But before I talk properly about what I like and dislike about Under the Greenwood Tree, let me quickly explain it. Under the Greenwood Tree is set in the town of Mellstock, and it begins with the arrival of the new schoolmistress Fancy Day. So Fancy Day, oh Hardy and your silly female names, her father is the gamekeeper and steward to a local estate, and she has been away being educated for some years, but she comes back to be the schoolmistress, and she enchants many of the local residents, including 3 men in particular. So this is one of those Hardy books where rather than having a love triangle, we have a love square. The 3 men who are interested in Fancy Day include Dick Dewey, who is a farm labourer, Mr Shiner, who is a wealthy rich farmer, and also Mr Maybold, who is the new vicar. The book basically follows Fancy's romantic entanglements and particularly her relationship with Dick Dewey. Now, things that I like about this book. I think the book talks about class in a very, very interesting way, and it's very, very clever the way that Hardy sets up these 3 different men that are vying for Fancy's affections to be from very different classes. We have Dewey, who is a farm labourer, and because Fancy is quite educated, because she's a schoolmistress, and because her father is quite proud of her, he doesn't think that Dick Dewey is good enough for her. And then we have the vicar, who is very much of kind of respectable middle class stock, and then we have Mr Shiner, who is much wealthier than the vicar, but to an extent less respectable because he's a wealthy farmer. And the way that Hardy sets up these class dynamics and explores the way that Fancy feels towards these different men and their lifestyles is very, very, very clever. I also think Fancy's quite an interesting character. She reminds me in some ways of Paula Power in A Lysodian, in the fact that it's quite hard to tell what she's thinking and sometimes you kind of want a little bit more of her personality, but I do think that certain decisions she makes are really quite interesting in the book. I also really enjoy the role of the church choir in this book. So Dick Dewey is a member of the church choir, and the kind of subplot of Under the Greenwood Tree, along with Fancy's romantic entanglements, is the subplot of the kind of battle in a way between the church choir and the new vicar, and Hardy uses this subplot to explore various things about church politics and to look at the clash between tradition and more modern religion, and I think that is done very, very interestingly and is an aspect I really like. I also really love the ending of Under the Greenwood Tree. Under the Greenwood Tree is, like I said, one of those kind of deceptive Hardy novels in that it feels much lighter than other Hardy novels. It's much shorter, it feels much easier, it feels so much less dark and bleak than his other books. It feels so much happier, and I really love how Hardy subtly undercuts this, and how for all the apparent lightness of various aspects of this book, there are also quite dark and serious things underneath it. I love the ambiguity and the cleverness of the ending. And I think the ending of Under the Greenwood Tree is done really well. It reminds me in a way of A Lysodian, which I spoke about on Tuesday, where I mentioned that I find the ending of A Lysodian a bit abrupt and underexplored, but I feel like there's a particular tone, a particular feeling that Hardy is trying to get across, which I think he fails to get across in A Lysodian, but for me he does manage in Under the Greenwood Tree. I think he's trying to do a similar thing, a similar mix of emotions, and I think he does it better in Under the Greenwood Tree, so I do really like the ending. In terms of stuff I don't like about it, it's not so much in Under the Greenwood Tree stuff that I don't think is done well, in that it's just not as interesting a Hardy book for me as his other books. It would be cruel and also inaccurate to say that Under the Greenwood Tree is nothingy, but in comparison to other Hardy books, it just doesn't have as much weight and meat for me. Like I said, it feels much lighter and less serious than other Hardy novels, and while I do think there are more complexities under there and there are still points of interest in the book, it just doesn't feel as deep and significant and as interesting as so many other Hardy books. I do like it, I had a fun time reading it, and it's an enjoyable book, but it doesn't have that epic beautiful, amazing quality that some other Hardy novels have. I like it, I think it's fun and enjoyable, but for me it's not so much what it lacks as a book and that it's just not as good as certain other Hardy novels. I also, like I said, I do feel like I want a little bit more of Fancy Day's personality. I also feel that while her relationship with Dick Dewey is done really well, and also her relationship with the vicar is explored quite interestingly, Mr. Shiner isn't really in it as much as I feel like he should be. I feel like there are opportunities missed there. I don't know. There might just be because I've seen a film adaptation where they do more with him and I might be a bit biased towards the book because of that, but I do feel like Mr. Shiner is a little bit underused, or that more could be done to explore him and his class role and how Fancy feels about him. Regardless, like I said, it's an enjoyable Hardy novel. I wouldn't start with it because I don't think it's the best, but I do think it's worth reading once you've read lots of other Hardy novels if you want to read one of his earlier books and a book that has a slightly different tone. That is all I wanted to say about Under the Greenwood Tree. Please let me know if you've read it and what you've thought of it, and I'll be back tomorrow to talk about yet another Hardy novel.